Parents of Reddit, what is one secret that you know about your child that could ruin their life? My 9-year-old son doesn't just understand the implications of his cystic fibrosis, that his life will be shorter and he'll never father children. One day I have to explain this to him and his younger sister. Honestly, that sometimes it's harder for me to cope with than everything else, that my daughter probably won't have her big brother around when she's older. I have the opposite problem. When I was a child, my mom started to tell me a story about me that apparently had something to do with right after I was born, but my dad stopped her and said he doesn't need to know about that. Last I've ever heard of it, the eerie feeling you'd imagine hasn't quite worn off, and this was 30 years ago. Other way around. My father was a great hockey player in my town and played quite well throughout university. I still get told all the time by everyone from my hometown how great of a hockey player he is, and I should be proud, and they don't know how he never went to the bigger leagues. Well, I was moving my grandparents to a nursing home and stumbled on a letter from a university offering him a full scholarship to go play hockey for them. They never told him because they didn't want him to leave the family farm, and as far as I know he still doesn't know about that. Like, at least 30 years have gone by. Now my grandparents have passed and I still haven't told him. If my parents ever tried to hide an opportunity like that from me, I think I would disown them. TL. Doctor, my dad might have been a great hockey player, but grandparents never gave him the opportunity. Something I will probably never tell my daughter. Her father wanted me to abort her. I almost did. I changed my mind a few minutes before the procedure. Her dad didn't want anything to do with her for the first few years of her life. Now, he and I share custody and he's a great dad. But if she ever found out that her father didn't want her and that's why he wasn't around in the beginning, it would devastate her. So, it's something her father and I promised to keep to ourselves. My mother decided to wait till I was 20 years old to tell me about the time I cooked my pet goldfish in my Easy Bake Oven because I wanted to make them seafood. We were in a store and I noticed they were selling Easy Bake Ovens and I commented about how those things were still around and how I kinda remembered having one when I was a kid, and she proceeded to tell me the reason why they took it. To turn this slightly on its head, I was nearly 2 months premature, so was brought straight to intensive care when I was born. Nobody bothered checking. This being Ireland in the early 90s, when they thought I wasn't going to make it, I was rushed off for an emergency baptism, and my mom, who'd had a feeling that I was going to be a girl, told the nun that she wanted me named Martha. It wasn't until she was speaking to the doctor, who kept referring to him, that they realized. End result, my dad had to burst in on the baptism, forever hold your peace style, and catch them, before I ended up Marty for the rest of my life. I love the story, mind you. It's not quite ruin your life stuff, but it still makes me chuckle. My husband and I have told our daughter that she was born with a tail. If you ask her what happened to it, she'll say we had to cut it off when I was born because it wouldn't fit in my pants. She honestly believes us, which might make us terrible parents, but I think it's pretty hilarious. We will tell her that she wasn't actually born with a tail before she starts school. Other than that, 4-year-olds don't have many secrets. 2 things. My daughter had an identical twin who didn't survive, and the man she knows as her father is not her father. I was in an abusive relationship and the biological father decided he would rather us both be dead if I didn't want to be with him, so he started driving into oncoming traffic. I reacted by fleeing the vehicle at 45 miles per hour because I saw a cop car parked a block away. I opened the door and grabbed my knees and tucked my head and rolled out and ended up really bruised and sore and killed one of the babies. But I made it the police and never saw him again. My teenage football star son will occasionally put on my wife's dresses and hang around the house. He acts like he is being funny, but he does it for hours. We noticed recently that he also does it sometimes when no one is home. Dresses rearranged, not put on hangers perfectly. So he's a masculine, studly, cross-dressing football star in HS. This would destroy him if it got out. We think it's okay and are happy to let him explore. Our 18-year-old girl has a third nipple just below her left one. It's not fully developed, just looks like a very small dimple, and the skin is ever so slightly darker around it. My wife, a pediatrician, says it might go away with time, or it could possibly get bigger after puberty. We are not even mentioning it to other family. So far no one seems to have noticed it. It wouldn't exactly ruin her life, but it would sure make the school years hell for her if people knew. When I was in 7th grade, I think, I was becoming increasingly suspicious that I might have some sort of mental issue, as I've always had severe problems when it comes to socializing, and I was realizing that a lot of the things I did as a small kid were kind of weird. One day, my sister told me that my mom accidentally mentioned something about me being autistic. Now, this wouldn't have meant much to me, but at that age all I knew was that it was basically a mental disorder, and that scared the piss out of me. I asked my mom and she denied it, but the pieces started coming together, and I realized what all the counseling was about when I was little. One day, I was given a form to take to my parents. I decided to take a peek, and unsurprisingly saw that autism was checked in the list of conditions. 5 years later, and as far as I know, my parents still think that I just accepted my mom's answer and don't know that I know. I have never brought it up since, and though I've gotten far better and am now actually a pretty social guy, I was a bit messed up for a while. I had really no perception of what was okay and what was not, and the idea that I was simply insane or something caused me to not care. I only started showering regularly a couple years ago, and I have absolutely rotten teeth due to lack of dental hygiene. 4 years, that still really isn't that great. Weird thing is, I never even really noticed how strange I was a few years ago. Typing this up has revealed just how severe it was, considering it's actually a very mild case of Asperger's or something like that. I'm way better off now and everything turned out alright, but I was near falling into severe depression several times and I have no clue how bad things might have been. I wish my parents would have just explained it early on. Not my child, but my boyfriend's child. His mother was arrested for raping a minor and electronic solicitation. He was there when his mother was arrested, and we are still not sure if she molested her own son or not. He starts child therapy next month. She has confessed that what she was charged with is true. Plus, the police have her phone with plenty of evidence, plus the cooperation of the victim's family, so she really couldn't plausibly deny it anyway. We obviously can't tell an almost 9-year-old what his mother was arrested for, but she told him it was all a mistake and she didn't mean to get arrested. So far we told him it's because she wasn't following directions. Kids understand punishments related to not following directions. Not a parent, but this just happened, so I'm throwing it in. My aunt just accidentally filmed one of her sons continually rub his crotch and gooch area and smell it, followed by digging for noseberries and feasting on them. This was all while filming her youngest son trying to master Rich Girl on the new Just Dance game, complete with lyrics. I have a daughter and a son, and I tell them their mother died soon after they were born. She actually died giving birth to them, but I couldn't ever tell them that. I was a mess at the time, and my last words to my wife were angry. I never got to tell her that I loved her. My daughter was adopted by a well-off family involved with the government, while my son was adopted by my brother and his wife. All the time that they spent growing up, they never knew me, and I never got to know them. Only recently did I meet my daughter again, after she had gotten herself into some political trouble. Soon after, I met my adult son for the first time. It didn't quite go as planned. I accidentally cut his arm off, then asked him to join me in Galactic Dominion. He said no, then jumped out to his apparent death. Ungrateful bastard. Not a parent, but a younger brother who went looking in something he shouldn't have. I was looking for something my sister had in her room when I came across a book. At first it seemed pretty innocent, all about crushes and such. But as the diary went on, I learned all sorts of shit I never wanted to know, like how she's bi and wants to fuck everyone, about how her and her friends suck balls and pretend like they're dicks, about how she uses household cucumbers as sex toys, about how she's sending nudes to people, about how she lost her virginity to this guy named Tyler that I have no motherfucking idea who he is, about how she wants to commit suicide and tried once, about how she would do it, about how she's only alive because there's a chance I can still be happy. Not my child, but my nephew. My wife and her sister were close as kids, but drifted apart as they grew up. Her sister's friends at school had totally transforming influence on her. Different clothes, experimenting with I don't even know what, etc. I guess it's not unusual for some people to go through phases, but this was more than that. She ended up marrying one of her school friends after graduation, and my wife and I got married around the same time. We both have kids around the same time. You'd think maybe this would bridge the divide, that maybe my wife and her sister would reconcile, and our son and our nephew could play together, grow up knowing their cousin almost like a brother. Nope. My wife's sister and her husband still hadn't come back to normal after their school days, and my wife didn't want anything to do with them. Not that I blame her. About a year after the kids were born, we were awoken in the middle of the night. We were always afraid this sort of lifestyle would end up with my wife's sister or her husband dead. Never thought it would be both of them at the same time. Next thing we know, our nephew has no other relatives, and he's living with us. We tell him they died in a car crash, and that there's no such thing as magic. Not a parent, but one story I know my parents have on me is about when I was 2 to 3 years old. I went to the playground and found the bottom of a balloon. You know the part you blow in. Anyway, I took said rubber circle and hid at the top of the playset and opened my pants and slipped it over the tip of my penis. Hours later I said, "Daddy, my thingy hurts," to which he replied, "Let's go in my room and check it out." My pants were removed and he saw the end of a balloon on his son's penis and immediately cut it off. The balloon, not the penis, thank God. Anyway, my parents have vowed to never tell this story to anyone except the person I decide to spend the rest of my life with. I'm 20. This is not my child but my neighbors. They are a normal Chinese couple who decided to adopt a dumped baby because they couldn't have kids. The child is Malay. In our country, a Malay is forced into Islam, but this child was raised Christian, so we can't really tell her the truth or she would be forcibly subject to conversion. If the authorities found out, the law does state that a Muslim child cannot be adopted by non-Muslims, so we are not sure how they got around that law. My mum told me I was an accident, and I don't mean the normal way you tell a child. She told me that she used contraception, a condom that split. She took the morning after pill, and when that didn't work she booked an appointment at the abortion clinic. The only reason she kept me was because she told my gran, who got overly excited and talked her into it. I know that sounds a harsh thing to tell a child. She told me when I was about 14, but it never traumatized me because she always told me it was the best decision she ever made and that I was determined to live. But whenever I tell anyone that she said that to me, I always get the look of pure shock spread across their face. So, this is the other way around, but during my freshman year of high school, my parents were experiencing financial difficulty, piles of medical bills for my mom's cancer, slowing business for my dad. In an attempt to save them money, I decided to use as little lunch money as possible. So, I essentially stopped eating breakfast, ate only pretzels and water for lunch, and had minimal servings for dinner. My parents clearly noticed the change in my appearance, but assumed it was because of puberty and not anorexia. I'm a guy. I feel like, if I ever told my parents, especially my mom, it would absolutely break their hearts. I know exactly this kind of secret about someone, although I'm not their parent. Here's a story. I'm friends with 2 girls who are sisters. I'm fairly close to both of them, and the older of the 2 has been fairly open with me and told me various personal things about her life. The most personal of these things is that years ago, when she was a toddler, her parents sometimes left her at the neighbor's place for an hour or so when they were busy or had errands to run. It turns out that the neighbor was a child molester, and he would spend his time with her, touching her in various inappropriate and illegal ways. It wasn't until years later that her parents found out, and the guy was prosecuted and jailed for a very long time. And it turned out he had molested other small girls as well. What nobody else knows is that he molested both of these sisters, not just the older one. The younger sister was too small to remember, but the older sister has since told me the story. I'll never mention the story to anyone else, well, other than semi-anonymously on the internet, without mentioning names. But I imagine, if the younger sister found out, she'd be pretty upset. I was sexually assaulted when I was 4 by my babysitter's 13-year-old son. I don't think my parents ever meant to tell me because I brought it up once and my mom says, oh, you remember that? Yes mom, I remember seeing a penis shoved in my face. I also remember coming upstairs from their pantry, they were Mormon, and had that huge ass pantry with food to feed their entire family for like 7 years or something, and getting yelled at from the babysitter because we weren't supposed to be down there. I remember going to see a counselor kinda. At least I remember her name. I also remember being in a pink leotard. I was in dance, talking to my parents. But I don't remember how it came up, or what was said. I brought it up last year. I'm 27. I get not telling details, but if your kid has a memory like this, talk to them about it. Don't hide it and make it a bad thing. Obviously, don't normalize it, but talk about the reality of it and let them process their feelings. Let them know what happened if they ask and are really old enough to understand, or at least let them know, based on age appropriate conversation. I'm not mad how my parents handled it when I was younger. They did well from what I do remember. I knew more now, especially since he did other things to other girls. But I don't know what. All I know is he got in trouble, but somehow it wasn't for what he did to me. What was really fucked up was when that family sent us an invitation to his wedding. And I just wish I knew more the sequence of events so I could better process it. How my parents found out, etc. I do have flashbacks sometimes, especially in intimate situations. I can't really do the same act now because of it, especially when pressured. Sometimes I wonder if I should tell my kid about his older brother that we didn't adopt after finding them both trapped in a Miami shipping container, sitting beside their real mother's chainsawed corpse, slippery in a vast pool of her thickening 3-day-old blood. But then I think, hey, how could that possibly come back to bite